السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. كبرات تخطاتلتنا كما يمسيهم كمتي تمالي بروميس تكبرنا مرب حيزنا لكم قريبنا لنا مسانا أولغا الله كما يتمسيو بتطبق إن شاء الله كتكتاتلونا بتعمي دا بخبرين دا تمحصنا إن شاء الله تصبو قعزو خقابرلنا بحنساب كن قعز. First of all, I would like to welcome my guest, Olga. How are you, Olga? I think a cola. Yeah, welcome your guest and yeah, welcome your guest.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here again, talking to all you good people out there.
Good. Thank you. Welcome back again. If they can hear us and will be good. If everybody can hear us, please give us an indication. Is the sound good? We'll be appreciating. Olga, today, obviously, in our show, we will be having a journey. First of all, we would love to have a background about your research. What was it about? Mm-hmm. And then as well, we are going to look at how does it apply to our own women, and the research you've done about what is it about. If you can give us a little bit brief about some, obviously did not see your first episode. If you can a little bit give us background who you are, and then you can go and talk about your research and your book.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, look, I was born in Morocco from a Russian refugee family, and we migrated to Australia when I was a child with my mother. So I have personal experience of being a refugee, of being an immigrant, and of living between lots of different cultures. So I am a social work academic, and my
Yes,
is the sound good?
The mic.
You need the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, I was very interested to find out what enables immigrant women to be so powerful, to be so creative and so effective in living life and overcoming all sorts of obstacles. And I thought that there wasn't enough good understanding, not only in professional literature, but also academically, and just in general culture. I didn't think there was adequate appreciation of how strong and how creative immigrant women are. Often immigrant women are seen as having less social status, less importance than other people in society, or that immigrant women have needs, they need to be helped, and that often, patronised a little bit, even though well-intentioned, efforts to help. But I thought that actually, immigrant women were so intelligent and really could teach everybody a lot.
Okay.
So my research really set out to discover this and map it out and write about it.
Okay. How does it, we will talk about obviously how does it relate to the government and how does it drive, the funding and the activity and all that. It was fascinating. I read your book and I was, very amazed of you to take this part as a woman and as a migrant, like you told us, and how this is applied to us as a migrant here. We will talk about that as well. But let me see from your one-to-one when you're doing an interview, obviously you came across Eritrean women, in general. So we wanted to highlight into that, or a similarity. There is a similarity, but there is a specific things, from each. Can you tell us what did you find about those differences?
About Eritrean women
Yes,
as
in
distinct from
general, yes, as in our community.
as distinct from Australian culture or from other immigrant communities?
Yeah, just highlight for us what is the differences, what is the similarity you found, obviously, in your research.
Look, I think people are people. So there's, we share a humanity. But what I found really delightful and very enjoyable was to see the Eritrean women that I know. They have a real a fighting spirit. They can, whatever situation comes their way, they think of a way to get around it in the most possible way, in the most positive way, to bring good out of situations. And I really appreciate too the how important the community is. So the women are embedded in their communities, they're part of their communities, and they care for each other like close family, which is not what you find in a lot of European societies. It's more people care for their own family and for their friends, and there's different levels of love and care that you offer others depending on how closely they are related to you. Whereas with the Eritrean women Eritrean people, that love, that deep human connection applied to members of the community and other human beings too.
That's excellent.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Now, what I would love to elaborate in this episode, Olga, I wanted to highlight. I had two interview from two different generation, and where I wanted to lead with this interview, the next generation, the recent now and the future generation. Are we, following, or are we benefiting from a previous, our family or our mothers or grandmothers or that generation? Are we inheriting all this kind of stuff? So just basically, I wanted to give you the two episodes I had. First, I had grandmothers where, two of them in 80s and 90s. So I did ask questions like, how they came into what they use, back home when they get married, before getting married, how they grown up, the history. And again, we came into how to raise the kids, and they had the difficulty. They told me how they struggle to bring the kids back home to, the diaspora. And then from there, was really, highlight, appreciated them, how they brought up. We wouldn't have an educated generation now. We have doctors and all that. And they are not educated women, but the benefit of education was all that difficulty are really appreciated. So if you can tell us what have we been using in this episode itself before I go to the next one, what did we use from a theoretical perspective, and how did we benefit from that?
From the effort,
the telling a story or the narrative story as a theoretical, and how does it benefiting us?
Yes, well, look, as people tell their stories, they are really sharing their reality, and sharing their experiences is actually a sharing of insight and knowledge for others about how to go about life. The listener, derives a lot of benefit from listening and in making sense of the world. So really, a narrative, when you tell your story, you're making sense of the world, and people listening also are able to make sense. And that's so important, to be able to make sense, for each person to be able to make sense inside of themselves of the world. So you need to construct meaning, so so that's very important.
Does it give a picture? You can try to visualize even, how those people, and you take that one as a powerful,
That's
and then
right.
you live, and that's how you inherit. Does it mix, that inheriting, that
Yes.
telling a story, and
Yes, that's right.
you feel proud of
That's right.
the
Yes.
community?
Well, look, the human beings have always passed on stories and taught children, taught each other, taught the community, taught each other through, let's say a nation was invaded, or if there was a terrible drought or some other calamity. Throughout the age, that's part of being human. You communicate, and you talk, and you tell the stories, and the younger generation, who may not have gone through it with you, know that it is true and it is real. So it's you're articulating you're proclaiming, you're expounding the knowledge that your community has, based on experience of living in a particular piece of land with all of its histories, a particular piece of geography, in various moments in time throughout history, and that is the knowledge that's grounded in that space and that time.
Yeah. This is fantastic, because I remember myself, like my grandmother's, or when she was telling me, and one of the, like the comment I used to read about the people used to follow us from our follower. Oh, remind me home, remind me my grandmother's, these memories for some of us building, reality, like you said, reality, or a sense of how do you, like we have a good example, Aborigine, and this is how they benefited from telling a story after all this, the trauma they went through. Can you relate? Because I feel like we have similarity there. We went through a lot of trauma, like war and displacement, and people grown up in different. How can we relate into the same beneficial as storytelling and other, other theories that are being used to rebuild the communities?
Looks storytelling is in Aboriginal communities, and
with the oppression theoretical, oppressive theoretical. How do you relate to that?
I guess yes, the what Aboriginal people would talk about, would explain to each other about not only the history and the sacred law of their land and of their country, but also of how to what the white settlers were doing. Obviously, this is a very different version. These are very different versions of what is true and what is real and what is important than the version of history, for example, of Australian history that was taught in schools, and that was believed to be normal and true, in the culture of the time. So even in the 60s and 70s, this is in very recent memory, what people believed, the gross injustice and the distorted understandings of anything to do with Aboriginal people and culture, and there was such gross inaccuracies and really violations, abusive, constructions of who Aboriginal people are and were, and what this land is. So really, you're dealing with resisting what may be the official culture or the official version of of people, of society. So, for example, with immigrant people have to, they come into a society, and what you consider to be normal and true, and not sort of, it's not something you question, you take it for granted. Well, it's not what's considered normal and taken for granted and self-evident in the new society. It's a different culture, different meanings, everything's different. So migrants have to accept, or have to accept being located, being positioned at the margins of society. They're not in the centre. The centre, they're new, so they're not at the centre of the society. Their culture it's different, so it's not at the centre. And so the struggle for all immigrants is how to deal with these stories that are told about who they are, and like that African people are all poor, and yeah.
It is very fascinating, Olga, because the study, we have to benefit from it when there is a study is been happening, and yourself one of them. Like all the theoretical perspective. For my knowledge, our people went through a lot. Not only one place, but they went through a lot of generation. Sometimes we blame each other. We kind of, without giving some factors, it can be contributing the environment, the structure where they went 1, 3, 4 places, and this is how it affects them. So dealing with all that kind of stuff, it really brings the people get disempowered, and gets really hard to concentrate within building their own life. So here I wanted to empowering women. What the strengths I wanted to take from here, from this coming generation or our generation, and bringing that, having, all that what we have been inherit. It's a lot in our shoulder. There is a lot, because my second guest speaker, she was she was a fighter in the field herself. So she was telling us how hard she used to hear about her dad taking her and telling her and all that. So how are we going to benefit from this while we don't see? We are far away, but she was in there. So how do you see, how can we inherit this kind of generation to do this now?
Yes, well, you see, we need to be listening to the stories of our family, of our community, of our extended family, about what is happening and what was happening. So we're really talking about different, and look, even if we're talking about a younger generation who was born overseas, so some of you people may have been born in Canada or in Sweden, but still you are connected, you are part of your family. So even if you weren't there, you are part of the family, and your mothers, your female relatives, we're all part of each other, and so there is a knowledge about how to be a good human being, and what is it that's important about living life, how to live life, what's important, what are the most important qualities, how do you live life as a good person, and then there's a different story about that in the Eritrean community, in the traditional Eritrean community. there's a different story about that in the, say, in the Australian society. There's different stories about that in different cultures. Okay, and of course, you know, in Australia, we live in a very diverse society, and in fact, so the thing is that often when you do come from a minority culture, you don't have access to the same material, symbolic, you know, social status, cultural opportunities than people who are part of the, you know, the larger group.
Yeah.
And so you know, it's managing the tension. So really, even if you're second generation or third generation, you still have to manage the tension between living between, on the one hand, being seen, defined as something as being maybe second class or as being not as good or as reliable or as whatever it is than the culture that's in power. You know, that means often sometimes you need to deal with racism, blocks to your progression in a say in a workplace. You know, you just can't seem to get the promotion that your work deserves.
Exactly.
Or it might be even overt racism, you know, real attacks.
But yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to, you know, to come back into our topic, the role of women. You know, like in our community, what I am sensing, that role from being, you know, the grandmothers and the mothers, elder mothers, and the young now mothers, there is a kind of the transition is not happening. You know, like those women, they're not coming out of the shells, and you know, like because there is a structure barrier where they used to be and where they are now. So can you tell us, is it could be in your study have highlighted that because as a migrant woman?
So what were I don't know what you're referring to, because I don't know what's happening with your...
Exactly, let me say it, rephrase it again. Today we have seen the grandmothers, how they play their part, you know, bringing on, being a mother and a dad in the same way in a different location. And but they now coming into second generation, or a mother she used to be a fighter in the field, but now we have a reserve. Women are not coming, even sometimes they're not working, or they're not participating in a study for some reasons. There are some, but it's not in the capacity that we can see it. So what do you think would be, because I don't want to blame the woman, because there is a blame on the woman. She's not doing this, she is not doing this. How can we put it into a perspective of structurist?
Yes. Well, yes, that's right. Look, I guess look, the important thing is to live life to your fullest potential, and you're feeling that there are a lot of women who may have been born here, or they've grown up here, they're now mature women, and you feel that a lot are not really living life to the fullest. Is that what your concern is?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, I can give you examples of you know what women that I interviewed told me about. So I interviewed women from 5 non-Western regions. So there were Filipinas, Vietnamese women, Lebanese, Horn of Africa, and Russians. So they came in different periods of time. So look, there were women who, so as I said, you know, when you come to a new country, you're going to have suffering. It's going to be difficult. It's a different world, and so on and so forth. And you know, you've lost a lot. Now the women who were able to, several years later, really feel that they are living the life that they think is best for their families, for their children, and for their community, and for themselves, who felt fulfilled about life, were those who were able to dig deep into themselves and into their culture, and think of ways of dealing with their situation in a way that was creative and positive. So, for example, there was a wonderful young woman who was a Filipina young woman. She had been in Australia already about 10, 15 years. And she married an Australian man. She found living in Australia very isolating, horribly depressed. She got clinically very depressed. She was anorexic, she was suicidal. Now, thank goodness at the time, there were a lot of free services locally. So her GP, her medical practitioner, was able to connect her with social workers and with employment programs and medical programs right there where she was, and support her, very intensively. And so she was able to regain her health, and she was able to then start rationalising about what was happening. And she reasoned that, look, she could have left her husband because he wasn't meeting her emotional needs at all. But she was able to rationalise it. Look, he's a good man. He's just not, he doesn't have the emotional wealth and the emotional, warmth that she needs. But he's still a good man. He's not being mean to her. She was able to gain employment, and in her. So, get her life on track and keep her marriage ticking over, look after her children. But being in contact with these Australian community workers was so empowering for her, because these people, that were mainly women, really cared about her, and she realised, look, hang on, these women really care about me as a person. So when she was going to give birth to her second child, they all came around, and she saw that, in fact, they weren't just her helpers, they really liked her and cared. So that was very empowering to see that the world out beyond the house actually is, is welcoming, and people are interested in you genuinely as a human being. It's very healing and very empowering.
Very good, because it reminded me, when we've grown up, even though it was back in Sudan, the neighbor, they come knocking door.
Yeah.
It's one family, big family. Like the neighbors in the street, and everybody friendly.
Yeah.
And they speak the same language. The structure here, the way how is structured, everybody closed door.
That's right.
It's an individualist.
That's right.
That's right. And the women should be staying alone, and the man is working, and this structure, it leaves a lot of impact, and then she cannot give. Because of that structure. Right. And how is it hard, like you're saying, it is true,
that's
Olga.
Right.
So, and this is where we're sending a message for them, being in a community, to build a strong community. You need to work, you need to connect, you need either with your own people, at least, if it is not the bigger society.
And so what happened, that's right. Now, she was able to reason. She was an educator, she was a journalist, so she was from the Philippines. She was able to reason that, look, in Australia, people are much more reserved. There's a much more reserved culture around, not wanting to intrude. You don't bother your neighbours. Whereas I believe that in Africa, you move in and you start living with your neighbours.
Exactly.
Well, no. But here, no, it's to be. It would be considered. You don't want to annoy your neighbours. It's great to be friendly, but you don't want to, impose on them. So it's a different way of interacting, and that's just different. Okay. It doesn't mean it's bad. Okay. It's different. So what she did was that she was able to reason about this, and when she got a job, it was in a local government, and it was 20 years ago. she was thrilled, but then she was subject to bullying and racism
Okay.
and victim, really mean sort of treatment. But she again, she drew on her Filipino culture and her Filipino wisdom about people and how to deal with things. So she again rationalized that, look, they're ignorant. She was the only Asian person in this big organization of several thousand employees. It was about 20 years ago, and she understood that these people are acting this way because they don't know, and that yes, it's racist and it's awful, but they actually don't know any better, and it's her responsibility, and this is her choice because she loved people. And the moral thing to do is to not to think ill of others, but to think the best of people and show them, teach them what an Asian person, what a Filipino person is really like, and so so her
getting into the Filipino, getting into your own community, how strongful it is. That culture, that strong bonding, how empowering, how it gives you the self-identity we were talking last time.
That's right.
And how this will build
that's
into
right.
emphasis into that. Today, I think we showed a little bit of our culture to Olga. How did you find our food and and the culture?
It's lovely.
Like all this stuff.
Eating from the same plate. It's just very intimate and very friendly and warm and loving. So that's right. Very warm, and really, and so Lynn, this young woman So she was able to turn the culture of her little office around.
That's good.
And she enacted warmth. She enacted the warmth that is, normal in her culture. So she ended up having a really good time there. But because she was able to overcome this, she said that she's able to, it's really exciting and thrilling to be able to work something, create good and loving out of a difficult situation, and of course you see people respond. She said that when she picks up her children at school, she plays with all the kids in the playground, and that's not what most Aussie parents would be doing because they're more reserved. But in the Philippines, that's a normal way of behaving. But this actually. It's great for her own kids to see how much joy their mother is bringing to other kids in the school. But also she's contributing because she's creating the other children in the school are having experiences of the neighbourhood being a safe and warm and supportive place where everybody's friends, and so that's a great contribution to the society.
That's it. It is. You remind me all this where I've grown up, although it was not back home. But each other. The neighbor. People defend you when you are in the street. You can call a stranger, even defend you from bullying, from all this. So it is a small community where we're coming into a change. Now we are into our next generation. And this is where it's an unlucky generation, but there is something where we can change with all this what we have. So what do you think we can try to elaborate, Olga, with what we have grown up? It's not there. And this is where they find the mothers, they find difficulty to tell, oh, I used to do this, you can do it. So how can we move into the next with this generation to make them belonging, to make them connected with their own communities? Where do you think we are failing?
Look, I think just because you live in a nice house, secure house with, and your kids go to school, everybody speaks English, I don't think that means that the work is done. There's a lot of work to do. That's just you know, that's just the surface. Really, there's a lot of work still to do. For children to be really enabled to flourish, you know, and reach their full potential, really flourish in life. Mothers have to, the mothers have to flourish, you know. Look, some women like to live quietly. You know, not everybody, well, the majority of people are not leaders. Some women like to live quietly, but I doubt very much that just because you speak English again, that you're really involved. You can really take part in the broader society around you. You know, are you able to really talk to teachers, understand what the children are studying? Can you lead? Can you help children through, you know, all of the school curriculum, all of the activities? Can you really be a guide for all of the? I mean, you know, they're going to the world. How do you deal with all the different all the values, different challenges that they will encounter? You need to be yourself involved with the society around you. You need to be not just a spectator and hiding in your little cubbyhole. You need to understand where you live. You need to know about you know, the history of your society. You need to understand, be able to follow current affairs and, you know, the general culture, in order to be a good guide for your children. Now, I've got another example.
Hit me with.
Okay, this is example from Vietnamese. Some of the Vietnamese women that I met. Look, this particular woman was, she was a boat person. She came by boat. She was, she was, you know, they were attacked by pirates and all sorts of things. Anyway, she was one of the first lot, you know, coming to Australia. Okay. Yeah, and so you know, she started working, you know, learning English, so on and so forth, and now what she realised, and she came from, you know, traditional Vietnamese culture, which is very well, it's it's, you know, based on Confucian culture, is very traditional, hierarchical, you know, the right kind of respect and to different levels, different, you know, relationships. So it's a very traditional culture, and again, it's not an individualistic culture either. You know, like the African culture is very. So, you know, the individual's not in the centre. That would be considered very selfish, you know, and barbaric, you know, the individual and what I want. But what she understood was that if she was going to be enable her children to really adjust well and be able to, you know, achieve their own goals, achieve their potential, be fulfilled and happy in life, the traditional Vietnamese parenting of obedience without questioning wasn't going to work very well. You know, to just rigidly that Vietnamese cultural style of parenting, are very hierarchical. So, you know, your child is down there, you're in charge, and you just give orders, and you need to be respected. That just doesn't work in Australia. And that she was going to lose the children. So so she developed bicultural parenting. She got together with other professionals in her community, and they talked about how they can keep really not only not lose their children to you know, to the broader modern, you know, culture, but keep children within their own culture, as well as and that, bring that culture, that Vietnamese culture, into the present day 21st century Australia. So she developed a different way of communicating with the children, more like equals, asking for their opinions, having open communication, trusting them to make their own decisions, trusting them to go out and go out with their friends and not and make good.
That's
good
benefiting from the service what is around. That's excellent. What I wanted to ask a question, and this is highlighting from some others audience we have. How do we come along with the women, like bring in those women and develop their skill from being mothers or housewife into being more effective and participating more in and out? And we have seen our mothers used to do the two jobs, being the dad who is a financial supporter and being the mothers inside, and that's how they brought up their kids. So, and we have seen that in generation back. Why can't we do this? And while we have all the opportunity, how can we develop that?
Yes, well, you need to get together with the women.
There is a lot of challenges, I know, but how can we come over all that challenges I was talking about?
Well, look, conversations like you're having, through this program is really important. So you need to come together and communicate about, life and how things for you, and really, and then probably start a program of
self-esteem,
education, self-development, and really, depending on what people need, women might need to even get their driver's license, learn how to drive, have contact with schools so that they can understand, how Australian education works. So you really need I think you need something concrete, like you need programs, you need to get together and you need to bring in resources so that the women have contact with resources and with people and opportunities they don't have at home. I think that's really important. You've got to bring them out of the home into a more public space. So the public space is at the community level, your community, but it's also your community interacting with the community around you. So interacting with the Australian community, with other community groups, service providers. So
to build that self-confidence,
yes.
We need, like program is saying, we need to, her to be involved on such a kind of these programs and others. But what I'm trying to see as well, a corner that my followers, some asking me, what is the role of the dad or the father or the husband? Where does he play into that, do you think?
Yes, well, look, often...
As an encouragement, to bring those changes.
Yes, well, often the role of the man can be very difficult when you come to a new country, and sometimes, so really there are specific challenges for men that are very difficult to endure. So, for example, there's a different notion about different understanding of what gender roles, what's normal for men, what's normal for women. And the traditional prestige of a man, well, doesn't work quite so well in a new society where, it might be that the man often can be unemployed, whereas the woman can find some part-time employment. So they might need to rely on their children to give them advice or to translate. So there's a lot of
challenges.
A lot of loss of dignity for the men. But look, I can give you again an example of
the study you had. Okay, that would be great.
Okay, and actually this is
positive.
This is from an Eritrean Eritrean family.
Mm-hmm.
So this was I think she was a mature woman, and they were very senior in Eritrean society, and the husband in particular was in a high position in business, in government, something like that. But when they arrived here, and they were housed in public housing where there were a lot of other Eritreans around, other refugees. But look, within 3 months, now there was, and I'm not sure now, but free English classes available for immigrants. And it was great to be with other Eritreans and so on. But look, within 3 months, this lady had figured out that if she stays in this housing situation, although it's, with the community, her children are not going to be able to succeed at school, because they had to really succeed. They had to, they were new, they couldn't speak English. How are they going to achieve what they really wanted to do? So she actually decided, and her husband supported her, okay, even though she wasn't formally educated. He was very educated. But he supported her decision. She thought they needed to move out into a house to be on their own, so that she could concentrate on really supporting the children's education. And so he supported that. He agreed to that. So they moved out. They did something that's kind of not quite very Eritrean, I suppose, just pursuing individual goals. And she was able to get, she dedicated herself to enabling, feeding the children and talking with the children, really providing a very loving family home, very stable, very secure. She was able to get into a local government role.
Okay.
And that gave her, again, it was for an unskilled position, but because she was in that organisation, she was able to go to conferences and to speak and to give her opinion about social problems in the community, in public, to the big Australian conferences, just to share her views. And it just made her feel, it gave her back her sense of dignity, because back home she had the dignity of being part of the society, a respected member of the society. People knew her, she could talk, she could, So all of a sudden she got that experience back again, because she was put in that physical place of, and she did, of being in that, having this little job. Now, so she's continued, and she continued to her work. She continued her education and skills development. In the meantime, her husband had not been able, to gain access to anything except something very, very simple, making furniture in a small community group. But he accepted it with dignity and grace. He was not diminished because he couldn't be an important man in the world, a big shot. He just accepted that's life.
Yeah.
You have to.
I need to move on.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is where there is a lot of resistance from so many men, and this is where you don't find this quality. Not only to come out of the shells not to be what he was there, but to let the wife to participate. And it takes two people in this country to work and to get into that, even supporting coming out. This is a good model or a good example.
Yeah.
But without the two decision, and you cannot do anything, especially in country like Western society, where the roles, the women are not known back home, to take the role of breadwinner, and that's kind of you know, that there is a lot into the culture side of that.
Yeah. But you know, what I found too at the end of it all, the women who were most successful in, you know, becoming leaders, in participating in work and really recreating life, and you know, their families were enriched and the children were, you know, enriched because the mothers were confident and they were able to deal with the outside world. So that's great self-esteem for those people around them. I asked them their sources of strength, and you know that all of them named a supportive male, supportive, yes, a support. The support. A lot, of course, had an inspiring mother, but even more had, and they thought it was indispensable. They had a very supportive male, close male relative, whether it was their husband or their father or their uncle. Without that loving support,
that's great to hear.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I used to hear, you know, in Arabic they said, وراء كل رجل عظيم امرأة. Behind every great man, a woman. Yeah. You know. Now I think we're going to take the opposite.
Well, that's right.
So this is a good encouragement for our audience to be
right.
that great supporter,
to
take into the lead. And I think we are moving into another different generation where they understand without the role of the women, we can't go anywhere. We are, you know, you cannot clap with one hand. It has to take two hands to clap to have that kind of a...
Well, 50% of the world's population are female, you know, and 50% are male. 50% are male. So, you know, like, how can you say that, you know, one's got the right to live and the other not? I mean, you know. Look, I'll give you another example, which is a kind of more serious one.
That's good.
And that is that there were some women who got clinically so depressed and really were, you know, when I spoke to them, they were stuck in very, very bad mental health and very unhappy, and, you know, and they were women who were in situations of domestic violence. So the men there, and you know, it was a tiny minority. It was a minority, but still, they weren't able to confront and get away from more traditional, some of the traditional oppressive ways that their husbands had, and that they, you know, they exercised, they were abusive, and the women were not able to get out from there, and they weren't able to access like one particular woman, they weren't able to access the cultural support, that they didn't have any workers from their own community who had enough skills to negotiate, and the culture, you know, like the shame of being domestic violence. How do you deal with that? And if you're part of the, say, Vietnamese culture or you know, Lebanese culture, it's shameful. You don't talk about it, you know, and often it's the woman who's at fault. So that's a cultural stereotype. So you really need workers who are professionally skilled to navigate all that and find a way out for the woman. Now, this situation, okay, so she's maintained her traditional, you know, Vietnamese role, but her child is damaged by this. She is damaged by it. It's not good for anybody.
Exactly.
Not for anybody. And the man is also, you know.
The domestic violence plays a big role. This is another day. I think we might have a really, you know, like an episode about domestic violence and the effect into the children, and how is it. And it's not spoken about, you know, how the trauma the kids go through, and the women and the family. And it's still, you know, like I read a lot and I do a lot, how structure it's really affecting into that, coming into poverty. It's a big aspect we're supposed to be talking in a more developed country like this. He said, like poverty in Australia. But when you go and study about it, there is a lot behind those doors. You know, there is a big different gap into there. So this is another episode I wanted to take. But coming back into our the role models of our women, how we're saying about back home and all that, it's still we're not benefiting from that into our this generation coming.
Not benefiting from
their experience, their role. They used to have a role.
Traditional, you
exactly.
mean Eritrean culture and wisdom. Are you talking about Eritrean wisdom around women and? Okay.
Beside that, also not only the wisdom, they had a big roles into for our independence. I will give you example. Grandmothers, they used to, although they were literate, they used to hide those letters from getting it from the fields to get into. They didn't have telephones. They used to stitch it to take that courage to go travel. They used to have help, to treat people really injured in the war.
Yes, yes.
So they used to play a big roles into that fight to get their independence and that self-esteem.
Yeah.
But now we find this is difficult in our generation.
Well, it sounds like you need to really conduct history classes, or really to share that knowledge. And to get some
this is what
resources.
They think.
Well, yes, about what women how women lived.
Does it help in it, like what
of
we're
course
saying,
it does.
history, narrative, and all that?
Absolutely, yes,
Yeah.
very powerful, because it's it's ages old wisdom about. This is a normal way for. This is how big a human being is. This is what is a human being capable of, whether they're a male or female. That's a big, huge thing. I mean, today in the 21st century, there are very narrow conceptions of what a human being, is capable of, or.
Basically, I'm really glad and flattered, like for the young generation are coming, having all this information from like yourself and getting ready. They are educated and how to have that role. We just need those transitional mothers to come and to be good role models.
Yes.
And this is where you give us a tip, like programs, like coming, participating in the community and all that history and stuff. So now how can we, if I'm coming back into those young generation, born in here, like we've seen how this, the identity and all that playing big roles. Any advice beside all what we have talking about before we close our session for today? Obviously, you're coming back for another topic.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
But we're really enjoying that.
Look, I think it's back to what you started saying earlier on, Najwa. Look at the experience of Australian Aboriginal people, the First Nation people of Australia. The amazing, relentless attempt at genocide, and people kept together. They kept together. They talked. They told stories. They said, no, this is how we do it, and this is. They kept the memory alive of people and events and how to do things. This is how we do things, and now they're really, they're really, really so much stronger, so much clearer, than they were 40 years ago, like in the 70s. I mean, there's such a difference, I think the broader Australian population is so much more respectful. There's still a lot of ignorance, of course, but I think Aboriginal people are really taking their place as the lead, in leadership, not just of their communities, but of Australian society. Such brilliant talents, and so you've just got to, we need each other. That's it.
Sure.
We need each other. We can't do it on our own.
Yeah.
And the women that I talked to across those cultures. The constant factor was the support of their family, extended family, and those community connections. So you've got to be together.
I think we spot on, Olga. I think a few episodes to come, like we wanted to concentrate on young women as well, like unis and teenagers and all that, and how we will bring some episode with them. We'll see, explore the difficulties and all, how the obstacle to create that gap between those generation. But and obviously I will have you for some other episode. But I'm really flattered to have you. I don't want to translate what you're saying because I will try to elaborate it with some others. Episode. I wanted to get the benefit of you being here, not to translate and take that time. I decided that way. But what I'm having a message to my audience. I hope we have benefited, especially my youngest or eldest sister and my mother. I thank them for all the effort they have done for us. And we're coming generation, how can we take the lead? You know, my eldest sisters or my youngest sisters. And this is without our contribution, I don't think we can go anywhere as a community. This is what I heard from Olga, and this is what I'm hoping from all this episode. How can we come out of the shells and we take the leads? And how can we, as women, we have a big part, not only history-wise, but we are in a better situation, we are in a better country, and I think we can do better. And then until I see you in some other episode, I said to you, have a good night and we'll see you. And thank you very much, Olga. Do you want to say anything before we close, Olga?
Yeah, look, I think the trick is to come out into the public, into society. You want to be participating in society as equals and to be respected as equals within the broader society. And that's what really matters for your family, for your children, for those around you.
Thank you very much, and I enjoy having you here and having my traditional food.
Yeah,
I feel proud.
Yeah. Invite me again, yeah.
Thank you very much, my audience. Until I see you next time, I said, have a good night, and we'll see you. Yeah?
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you for watching us.